Rome Fencing Championship. Vladimir Smirnov stood on the piste at the World Fencing Championships in Rome, Italy on July 19, 1982. He was the defending Olympic champion in foil, a skilled foil and épée fencer representing the Soviet Union. Across from him was his West German opponent Matthias Baer, the 1976 Olympic gold medalist and the world's second-ranked fencer. The quarterfinals of the team foil event was underway. During a simultaneous attack, both fencers collided with great force. Smirnov's opponent thrust forward. The blade made contact with Smirnov's protective gear, but something went terribly wrong. Baer's foil broke when it struck Smirnov's chest protector. The break created a jagged metal shard that shot forward like a spear. Fencing masks are designed with fine mesh to protect the face, but the broken blade bypassed the protective barrier entirely. The sharp fragment of metal pierced through Smirnov's left eye socket. It did not stop there. The momentum drove the steel deep into his brain tissue. The champion collapsed. The bout was immediately stopped. Medical personnel rushed onto the piste. Smirnov lost consciousness almost immediately. He was transported to Agostino Gemelli University Polyclinic, where surgeons assessed the injury. The metal had penetrated deep into the frontal lobe, severing a cerebral artery and causing severe intracranial hemorrhage. Doctors performed emergency surgery, but the damage was already extensive. The blade had torn through delicate neural tissue. Hospital reports indicated he was in a deep coma with no brain reflexes, maintained on life support. State-run television described him as clinically dead. There was no recovery. 9 days after the blade pierced his skull, Vladimir Smirnov died from complications of the traumatic brain injury on July 28th or 29th, 1982. The fencing community was shaken. The international governing body responded immediately. They mandated a complete change in blade manufacturing. All future foil blades would be made from miraging steel, a material specifically designed to bend under stress rather than snap. The change was permanent. While no fencer has died this way at elite international competitions since, the sport continues to prioritize safety improvements. Mankato Training Camp. Corey Stringer reported to the Minnesota Vikings training camp in Mankato, Minnesota on July 30th, 2001. He was a 27-year-old offensive tackle, a massive man who weighed 335 pounds. The temperature that morning was already climbing, and the humidity made the air feel thick and oppressive. Heat index readings would later show conditions well above safe levels for intense physical activity. Stringer struggled through the morning practice session, but was unable to complete it due to exhaustion. He did not participate in the afternoon session that day. Coaches ran the team through demanding drills. The next day, July 31st, he returned determined to complete the full practice. He vomited on the field 3 times, but continued practicing. He completed the 2.5-hour morning practice session conducted in full pads, though the heat index would reach 99 degrees by 11:30 when practice ended. After practice ended at 11:30, he walked to an air-conditioned trailer. Inside the shelter, he became weak and dizzy. Trainers attended to him there for 50 minutes before emergency services were called. He was not treated for exertional heat stroke during this time. He was transported to a hospital where his core body temperature measured 108.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That number was dangerously high. At that temperature, proteins in the body begin to break down. Organs start to fail. He was unconscious when he arrived at the hospital. Doctors worked frantically to cool his body. Emergency room personnel hooked him to intravenous fluids and poured buckets of icy water over him. As many as 15 physicians treated him, but his internal temperature remained stubbornly elevated. The damage had already begun. He developed a bleeding disorder, then his kidneys failed, requiring dialysis. His breathing became compromised, necessitating mechanical ventilation. Finally, around 10 o'clock that evening, his heart began to fail. Medical teams fought through the night, but each passing hour brought new complications. Despite moments where physicians believed he was improving, the cascade of organ failure could not be reversed. Family members gathered at the hospital as doctors delivered updates that grew progressively worse. Corey Stringer died the following morning, August 1st, from multi-organ failure triggered by exertional heat stroke. The NFL responded immediately. They completely overhauled training camp protocols across the league. Mandatory water breaks, available shade, strict heat index monitoring, and limited practice duration became permanent requirements. No player would die this way again. Le Mans Circuit. Pierre Levey was driving for Mercedes-Benz during the 24 Hours of Le Mans in France on June 11, 1955. The endurance race had been running for several hours. Cars screamed around the circuit at extreme speeds, drivers pushing their machines to the limit. Leveg was an experienced racer, but the track conditions were were chaotic. Cars weaved through traffic, some moving at vastly different speeds. Ahead of him, Jaguar driver Mike Hawthorne suddenly braked to enter the pit lane. Lance Macklin, driving an Austin Healey between them, swerved violently to avoid Hawthorne's slowing car. Leva, traveling at approximately 150 miles per hour, had no time to react. His Mercedes struck Macklin's Austin Healey, and the ramp-like rear design of the smaller car launched the Mercedes into the air like a missile. The car flew toward the earthen embankment that separated the track from the spectator area. It struck the barrier and began disintegrating mid-flight. The Mercedes had a magnesium alloy body, a lightweight material chosen for racing performance. When magnesium ignites, it burns hotter than ordinary fire. The moment the car hit the embankment, the bodywork exploded into white-hot flames. But the destruction did not stop there. The heavy engine block tore free from the chassis and flew into the packed grandstand along with other debris. At least 81 spectators were killed, though some estimates suggest the toll may have been higher. The engine block and flying debris struck spectators directly. Burning magnesium fragments rained down on the crowd. Rescue workers rushed forward with water, but water makes magnesium fires worse. The chemical reaction intensified. Flames spread through the grandstand as spectators tried desperately to escape. Screaming filled the circuit. Bodies lay scattered across the viewing area. Race officials faced an impossible decision. Stopping the race immediately might clog the roads, preventing ambulances from reaching hospitals. They let the race continue for hours while the carnage was cleared. Leva had been killed instantly when thrown from the car. The Le Mans disaster remains the deadliest accident in motorsport history. Mercedes-Benz withdrew from racing until 1985, a 30-year absence. Circuit designs were completely overhauled worldwide. Pit lanes were separated from the main track. Barriers were redesigned. The grandstand massacre forced the racing world to finally prioritize spectator safety. Mont Ventoux. Tom Simpson was climbing Mont Ventoux during the Tour de France on July 13, 1967. The British cyclist was 29 years old and considered one of the strongest riders in professional cycling. But Ventoux was brutal. The mountain rose nearly 6,000 feet, exposed to relentless sun with no shade. Temperatures that day climbed above 90 degrees. The heat radiating off the pale limestone road made conditions even worse. Simpson had taken amphetamines before the stage. He had also consumed alcohol. The combination masked his body's warning signals. His heart rate was dangerously elevated, but the sparkle dust suppressed any sense of fatigue or pain. He pushed himself beyond normal human limits, unaware that his body was shutting down. About a mile from the summit, his riding became erratic. He began weaving across the road, losing coordination. Other cyclists noticed something was wrong. Then he fell off his bike and collapsed on the scorching pavement. His support crew rushed to help him. Simpson was still conscious. His mechanic, Harry Hall, tried to persuade him to stop, but Simpson insisted on continuing. "Me straps, Harry. Me straps," he said, noticing his toe straps were undone. They lifted him back onto the saddle. He managed to pedal another 500 meters. Then he fell again. This time, he did not get up. His heart was giving out. The combined effects of sparkle dust, alcohol, heat, and exhaustion had pushed his cardiovascular system past the breaking point. Medical personnel called for an emergency helicopter. They worked desperately to stabilize him as they waited for airlift. Approximately 40 minutes after his collapse, Simpson was airlifted to Avignon Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 5:40 p.m. The autopsy revealed amphetamines in his bloodstream. The alcohol had accelerated dehydration. His internal temperature had been fatally high. Simpson's death became a catalyst for change in professional cycling. Drug testing was introduced at major races in 1968, including the Giro d'Italia, Tour de France, and Summer Olympics. The era of unchecked chemical enhancement in cycling began to end on the slopes of Mont Ventoux, North Little Rock Diamond. Mike Coolbaugh stood in the first base coaching box at Dickey Stevens Park in North Little Rock, Arkansas, on July 22, 2007. He was 35 years old, a former minor league player, now coaching for the Tulsa Drillers. It was a routine double-A game on a summer evening. Coolbaugh wore no protective equipment. Base coaches never did. The batter at the plate pulled a sharp line drive down the first baseline. The ball screamed off the bat at high speed. Coolbaugh had minimal time to react, raising his hand slightly before impact. The ball struck him in the neck area with brutal precision. The impact hit the worst possible location. It ruptured his left vertebral artery, one of the major blood vessels supplying the brain. Coolbaugh collapsed immediately in the coaching box. Players from both teams rushed toward him. Doctors and trainers, including some who were attending the game, immediately began administering care. The bleeding was massive and uncontrollable. Blood flooded into the surrounding tissue and began cutting off oxygen to his brain. CPR was performed on the field. He was transported to Baptist Medical Center, North Little Rock, as his condition deteriorated rapidly. His brain was being starved of oxygen. The arterial bleed continued despite all efforts to control it. He stopped breathing as the ambulance arrived at the hospital. Within an hour of being struck, Mike Coolbaugh was pronounced dead at 9:47 p.m. The cause was internal bleeding from the ruptured artery. His wife Amanda and young children were notified. He had been hired as coach just 19 days earlier, taking the position because his two sons wanted to see him on the baseball field. Major League Baseball responded within months. On November 8, 2007, MLB general managers mandated protective helmets for all base coaches starting in the 2008 season. Some coaches, including the Dodgers' Larry Bowa, initially disagreed with the decision, viewing helmets as uncomfortable or impractical, but the rule became permanent across all levels of professional baseball. No coach would stand unprotected in the coaching box again. Fujairah waters. Fran Crippen entered the water for a 10-kilometer open water race in Fujairah, United Arab Emirates on October 23, 2010. The 26-year-old American was one of the world's best open water swimmers, a two-time national champion with years of international competition experience, but the conditions that day were dangerous. The water temperature measured over 86 degrees Fahrenheit, far warmer than safe standards. Crippen began swimming with the lead pack. The race attracted elite competitors from around the world. Safety boats positioned themselves along the course, but their focus remained on the front runners. In water that warm, the human body cannot cool itself efficiently. Core temperature rises steadily. Heat exhaustion builds gradually, often without visible warning signs. After 8 kilometers, Crippen told his coach he was feeling thirsty and unwell, yet he continued racing. Somewhere during the race, Crippen began struggling. His body was overheating from the inside. Hyperthermia was likely setting in. The warm water surrounding him prevented any natural cooling. His muscles lost coordination. His thinking became confused. He was last seen struggling near a feed station on the final lap, but no safety marshal intervened. Other swimmers passed him. The boats followed the leaders. He disappeared beneath the surface. No one saw the exact moment. The race continued. Competitors crossed the finish line and exited the water. Officials conducted post-race procedures. Awards were prepared. Nearly 2 hours passed. Finally, fellow American swimmer Alex Meyer realized Crippen had not finished. Meyer and other swimmers returned to the water to search. Deep-sea divers found his body floating near the final buoy, the same area where he had last been seen swimming. Recovery teams pulled him from the water and attempted resuscitation, but he had been submerged too long. He was rushed to Fujairah Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. The autopsy concluded he died from drowning and heat exhaustion, though investigators could not exclude cardiac abnormality or exercise-induced asthma as contributing factors. The warm water had killed him slowly while dozens of people watched the race from boats and shore. FINA, the International Swimming Federation, faced immediate criticism. By 2013, they established water temperature limits between 16 and 31 degrees Celsius. They mandated increased numbers of safety craft and implemented better swimmer tracking systems. Fran Crippen had drowned in plain sight. Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Dan Weldon lined up at the back of the grid at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in Nevada on October 16, 2011. The 33-year-old British driver was a two-time Indianapolis 500 champion, one of the most accomplished names in open-wheel racing. He had agreed to start from the rear as part of a special challenge. The oval track was fast and tight, with 34 cars packed closely together at speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour. On lap 11, chaos erupted ahead of him. A car made contact with another, triggering a chain reaction. Within seconds, 15 vehicles were spinning out of control. Smoke and debris filled the track. Cars collided at extreme velocity. There was no escape route. Weldon's car hit the wreckage directly and launched into the air. His vehicle flew toward the catch fence, the steel barrier designed to protect spectators. But at that speed and angle, the fence became a weapon. Weldon had slowed from 224 miles per hour to 165, but his path was blocked. The car struck the fencing with enormous force, sailing approximately 325 feet through the air. The chassis rotated and traveled parallel to the fence. A steel post struck the right side of the car, creating a deep defect from the pedal bulkhead through the cockpit, shearing off the roll hoop. The post penetrated the cockpit and struck Weldon's helmeted head. He suffered 2 distinct impacts to his head, with the second blow from the fence post creating unsurvivable injuries. Fire and debris scattered across the track as multiple cars burned. The car fell back to the racing surface and slid to a stop. Race officials immediately threw the red flag. The track fell silent except for emergency sirens. The whole Montreux safety team responded rapidly. Weldon was extricated from his car by the trackside safety team. He was airlifted to University Medical Center in Las Vegas, but was pronounced dead on arrival. The cause was blunt force trauma to the head. Fellow drivers were told the news in their garages. Many broke down. The race was canceled. Fans filed out in stunned silence. IndyCar responded by developing the DW12 chassis, which included rear wheel pods designed to prevent wheels from interlocking and launching cars airborne. The changes also accelerated development of cockpit protection systems, eventually leading to the aeroscreen that now shields drivers' heads from impacts. Sydney Cricket Ground. Philip Hughes walked to the crease at the Sydney Cricket Ground in Australia on November 25th, 2014. The 25-year-old batsman was playing in a Sheffield Shield match, Australia's domestic first-class competition. He was an experienced player who had represented his country in international cricket. He wore a standard helmet with a grill protecting his face, but the back of his neck remained exposed. The bowler Sean Abbott sent down a short-pitch delivery aimed at head height. Hughes attempted a hook shot, a common batting technique where the sus player swings at a ball bouncing near shoulder level. He mistimed the shot completely. The ball evaded his bat and struck him on the left side of his neck, just below his left ear, beneath the helmet's edge. Hughes collapsed immediately. The ball had hit a tiny vulnerable area that caused a vertebral artery dissection, a tear in one of the major blood vessels running up the neck to the brain. Sean Abbott ran to him and held his head. Other players quickly gathered. The impact was catastrophic. Hughes took 3 deep breaths, his eyes dilated, and witnesses immediately recognized something was seriously wrong. Emergency medical staff sprinted onto the field within 42 seconds. They recognized signs of severe neurological damage. An ambulance was called immediately. Hughes received mouth-to-mouth resuscitation before being transported to St. Vincent's Hospital, where doctors performed emergency surgery to relieve pressure on his brain. The dissected artery was causing massive internal bleeding. Blood flooded into his skull. His brain began to swell uncontrollably. He was placed in an induced coma. Surgeons worked to stop the hemorrhaging, but the damage was too extensive. Family members gathered at the hospital. The cricket community held vigil. For 2 days, there was hope he might recover. Neurological tests were conducted repeatedly. Each result showed no improvement. The bleeding had destroyed too much brain tissue. On November 27th, Philip Hughes died from the brain hemorrhage caused by the arterial dissection. His death, caused by an extraordinarily rare injury with only 100 such cases ever reported, prompted years of safety reforms in cricket. Independent reviews led to mandatory British standard helmets by 2016, comprehensive concussion protocols, and eventually mandatory neck guards by 2023. The tragedy transformed cricket's approach to player safety worldwide.